Go to primemediaplus.com.
The shout out right now goes to Sylvia Walker, who is joining me via Zoom this afternoon. And in our Life Hacks segment, we want to focus on how to avoid becoming a victim of investment scams. Sylvia, who is with us on Zoom, is an author, an independent financial advisor, someone who's passionate about educating South Africans on improving their relationship with money. And her latest book is called Home Truths About Money, Candid Advice for Creating Personal Wealth. It's packaged as 30 home truths about money, and they address some of the most common concepts we need to be able to understand, some of the common misconceptions we need to overcome around personal financial management. It's full of very accessible information on everything from different forms of investments and saving to property ownership to debt management and much, much more. Today, though, I've asked Sylvia to focus on the chapter which warns us against losing our hard-earned money to the con artists and scammers who are unfortunately out there in great numbers. Sylvia, thanks so much for joining us. Let's dive straight into what is home truth number 15 in your book, Sylvia. And in your book, it's called Greed Comes Before a Fall. Now, I think many of us wouldn't like to describe ourselves as necessarily greedy, but the point is, Sylvia, an awful lot of people fall for investment scams and fall for the online schemes because they are, if not greedy, sometimes desperate to improve their circumstances. And the allure of making money quickly is one that a lot of people really find difficult to resist. And especially in the current era where we've got used to kind of instant on-demand everything, do you think that plays a role? Do you think perhaps it's easier than it used to be to fall for these kind of scams because they offer instant money?
I think, today the technology allows a lot more of these scams to flourish.
Yeah.
There's a lot more information around. There's a lot more communication. So a lot of it's in our faces, where maybe 30, 40 years ago, it would be spread by word of mouth. Now we have technology that can tell us the stuff is available and this is how you can get rich quick.
So it used to be a sort of a personal network. Somebody actually had to come and physically convince you to join the Ponzi scheme or whatever it is. We'll talk about what they are shortly. But now it's as simple as a WhatsApp. And many of them, in fact, do operate on WhatsApp, don't they?
Yes, they do. A lot of them do. And if I think about many moons ago, I always think about the rotten milk story, the Kubis story in the 80s, where, people cultivated this rotten milk. It was supposed to be used for beauty products, but actually it was a huge Ponzi scheme. And that was kind of spread by word of mouth. Now, today, there are WhatsApp schemes. There are on Facebook, TikTok. There's just so many ways to reach people and to create this illusion of wealth and to have that allure. You do this and you can also be like me, or, follow this and you can also create a lot of money and create a lot of wealth for yourself. So, it's in our faces, unfortunately. And as you said earlier, it's not necessarily greed, but I think a lot of it has to do with people perhaps just everybody wants to be rich, let's be honest. So if there's a shortcut, why not take it? I think that's really, what it taps into.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, as you say, the technology allows for the proliferation of the scam artists and their ease of finding you and getting under your skin, as it were, and of selling you the sort of the aspirational lifestyle that they want you to fall for. What doesn't seem to happen as much is the proliferation of the people saying, hey, be careful, I was scammed. Sylvia, do you think that's because of the sort of the psychology involved? We hear about it when a massive Ponzi scheme collapses or, the really big cases blow up, but you very seldom hear about the individual who fell for a romance scam or who lost their savings to a get-rich-quick offer, because those people are often too embarrassed to speak up and say, it happened to me.
Yes, I think it is embarrassment to a large extent. And I think, we only hear about the big ones collapsing when they become big because the media picks up on it and there's enough people who come forward. But I think, as you said, it is embarrassment. People keep quiet and they kind of maybe chalk it down to experience.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of today's interview is to help our listeners not have the experience of being victims. So let's start by looking at a couple of the sort of the common problem children, if I can call it that way. Sylvia, you've already mentioned the word Ponzi scheme. I think a lot of other people will have heard the phrase pyramid scheme, but not really understand what those are. Should we start there? Because they're two different things for starters.
They're similar, but they are different. Basically, a Ponzi scheme has no product attached to it. So it was good old Charles Ponzi. I think it was in the 1920s. He started he had this whole idea with the stamps, where people would buy stamps and but then nothing was delivered. No product was delivered or no service was delivered.
Yeah.
So a Ponzi scheme basically just collects money. And as more money, people come in, more money comes in, and this pyramid forms. And obviously people are paid out, and eventually it collapses. So that's a Ponzi scheme. Now, a pyramid scheme can have a product attached to it. It can have some product or service. And it's like a multi-level marketing thing. So there can be something sold, but also then you are encouraged to recruit other people and perhaps paid a bonus to recruit people, and more people come into the process. So there is a bit of a difference. I mean, the Ponzi scheme is really the dangerous one, because payouts to investors are fed by new people coming in and new people signing up. So that's really the one to be very careful of.
As you've mentioned, there are many other iterations, and there are offers that come via a WhatsApp group, and you may well be referred to those, or your details shared by somebody that you do know and trust. But Sylvia, let's talk a little bit about some of the red flags to look out for that should make you pause and take a breath before you commit, even if you've been referred by somebody you do physically know in real life. What are some of the big ones you'd like to mention?
I think, Pippa, the thing is, it's always, like one of the big things for me is who's giving you that advice. So, if it's a chat around the braai fire, I've got this great thing I'm investing in, that you need to take with a pinch of salt. There are a lot of red flags and a lot of things people need to watch out for, but it's often out of ignorance. And that's all it really is. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So the very first thing, obviously, is if you're being promised a great return, but it's safe, you're not going to lose money. There's no such thing as a safe investment. Everything carries a risk. And when you're being offered a great return, anything outside of what is the normal return, and there I would say between 10 and 15% is a sort of normal return that you could get on an investment. If somebody's promising you 20, 30, 40%, it's simply too good to be true. Also, very often what they do is they'll say to you that it's like a limited offer, or it's a special club. It's only by referral. So it's that sort of exclusive thing. Yeah. Or it's a limited offer. So it's an old marketing tactic. You create the thought of scarcity. So I've got to buy in. I've got to jump in. Yeah. It's the whole FOMO thing. I must get in before it runs out. And then also I say to people, if anyone's offering you something, find out how it's making money. That is probably the single biggest thing that anybody can actually do. You don't have to be a financial whiz kid to understand how a thing is making money. Are they selling something that's generating a profit? Where is the money coming from? And if you can't see that there's something being generated and money being made, then you need to stay far away, because obviously then it's being funded simply by new money coming in. And as I say, that's not difficult to actually, for the average person to figure out and to ask that question, apart from anything else.
So if the buy-in is 100 Rand and person A pays that 100 Rand, and that 100 Rand is then paid out in profit to person B, who's recruited person C, etc., it's the same 100 Rand filtering down, and no wealth is actually being created in that process, Sylvia.
No, and business is all about making a profit based on something, on a producing a product or providing a service or something. So money isn't created out of thin air. And as I say, so that's a very simple question that you can ask and figure out. Coupled to that, of course, is stuff like, does this business have a website? Do they have premises? Do they have staff? Is there infrastructure in place? And then, of course, the other huge thing is the whole FSCA issue. Anybody offering you a financial product or financial advice must be registered with the FSCA, with the Financial Services Conduct Authority. So, if they're not registered, and you can ask if they're registered. Yeah. But that can be a bit grey as well, because they can lie. They can say, yes, they're registered. They can give you a fake certificate. It happened to me once. I challenged an organisation. Yeah. They gave me the information. I went and looked up the number that they were using, the registration number. It wasn't even related to them. Gosh. So even that can be, faked. But the point is, they need to be registered. So you can go to the FSCA website, you can check out whether this organization is registered, but people often aren't aware of that. Not anybody and everybody can just sell you a product or give you financial advice.
It's so important
There is a process
to know that.
To be followed.
Yeah, and you have the right to go to the FSCA and say, I'm checking this registration number, that it belongs to who it says it does. Yes. Sylvia, you echoing Wendy Nola, our consumer journalist, often points to that. If the website doesn't have a physical address, doesn't have a phone number, doesn't have an actual way of reaching the business, and they can't show you an actual product that they are selling or service that they are delivering, it's a huge, huge red flag. You have the right to ask to see these things before you part with your money. And if you don't, you end up like, Caro's just written to say, my mom lost over 10,000 Rand. In her case, the scammers told her a well-known celebrity was invested in the scheme and had made a profit. And she thought, well, if it's good enough for them, it must be good enough for me. That's one of the classic marketing techniques they use, isn't it, Sylvia?
It is, absolutely. So they'll use a public figure, or they'll generate some, they'll use AI to generate some endorsements, and then off they go. And it happens to not actually even public figures. It happens to people for more walks of life. They pick somebody who's perhaps very active on social media, and then they will befriend other people, and then they will start asking for money or start offering an investment scheme. So it varies from using, as I say, well-known public figures to people who are just normal people maybe, or people who are perhaps active in the financial industry, and they get cloned. And, it's actually mind-boggling, Pippa, that every day there seems to be more and more ideas and more schemes that come about. And we'll never stop that probably, but what we can do is make people aware and to actually take care of ourselves, our own finances, and just heed those red flags. Yeah. Ask those questions. Gosh. Because it's the gullible actually that are taken for a ride, unfortunately. And I don't use the word in a derogatory way. Yeah. I just mean, people, what they see is what they think is real. And off they go. And it's easy afterwards to cry over spilt milk, unfortunately.
I mean, Ricky just forwarding me a perfect example. This coming over WhatsApp. 4 days, cash back 100%, invest 4,600 Rand, earn 22,700 Rand, 48 hours to get your cash back, special for new members only. I mean, it's got every single one of the red flags you've just mentioned, Sylvia, in the space of one WhatsApp message. And, as you say, if you know to look out for those things, then but if you are in debt, wondering how you're going to pay your bills at the end of the month, and that message arrives on your phone and catches you at a low point, you can understand how somebody might go, well, it might be worth the chance because, if it happens, it's going to change my life kind of thing. And down the rabbit hole you go. Sylvia, you mentioned the recruitment issue, and I want to emphasize this again because it's such an important thing. If what is being offered to you depends on you recruiting other people to participate, is there ever a scenario in which that is above board in your view, or is the mere fact that they are asking you to recruit others the biggest red flag of all?
I think it depends on what it is. So if it's a pyramid scheme and there's a product being sold and you are encouraged to recruit other people and build a team under you and then sort of move up through the ladder, then I suppose it's okay to say other people are being recruited. But it's not okay if you're recruiting people and they need to pay to join. So, there've been a lot of these products that people sell at home, like I want to say the Tupperwares and whatever. A lot of those kind of home selling multi-level marketing organizations often would have part of their business model that you recruit other people, you kind of widen the net. Yeah. And then it's okay. But as I say, if you're recruiting people only for them to pay to join, and then that money is being used to pay early investors or earlier people, then it's definitely not on. No.
Okay. Just for anybody coming in midway to this conversation, our guest is Sylvia Walker, the author of Home Truths About Money, Candid Advice for Creating Personal Wealth. She is an independent financial advisor, really passionate about improving our financial literacy and protecting ourselves against having our money stolen by con artists. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about time because, Sylvia, one of the pressure points, as you've already mentioned, is the pressure, not just because this is exclusive, it's a limited time only, it's only for a special group of people, but the limited time is a key red flag here, that there is pressure that you must commit before the end of today or within the next 12 hours or within the next 2 days even. I've never forgotten a listener phoned in and said the best piece of advice my dad ever gave me was the line, if it has to be now, it has to be no. Would you agree with that? If somebody's putting pressure on you to commit in a hurry, that's a sure red flag.
Absolutely. It's absolutely a red flag. It's also very desperate, actually, apart from anything else. So I really like that. If it has to be now, it has to be no. Spot on.
Yeah.
No, do not fall for that. The other thing I wanted to say too, just in terms of products, is sometimes too they cloud these propositions in very technical terms, in like weird jargon and things that you can't understand. That's another thing. If you don't understand it, don't put your money in it. It's as simple as it is.
Yeah. It sounds so simple on paper, and yet, Sylvia, human psychology being what it is, it's a complex thing. And, the last thing to say is really people, these scam artists flourish and proliferate because people are afraid to admit that it happened to them, don't want to spread the word and alert other people to the risk because they're too embarrassed to admit that they fell for it. I mean, obviously, we hope an interview like this prevents that happening to anybody listening, but sunlight is a good antiseptic in this case, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And, I read a while ago, somebody said that investing should be like watching paint dry, successful investing. Making money there's tried and tested ways. It's happened for decades and decades. So these stick with the norm, stick where there's a history, where there's a track record. Don't fall for these things because it's not going to work out in the long run, unfortunately. So as I say, it's like watching paint dry. Stick with the regular investments, with the regular financial services organizations, and get a regular return, and you have that security because they've been around forever.
Yeah.
They're not here today and gone tomorrow.
And if you want some examples of safer investment options, do go and look for Sylvia's book called Home Truths About Money, which is published by Penguin Random House and is available in all good bookstores and online at a recommended price of around 300 Rand. Sylvia, a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for the advice.
Great. Thanks, Pippa.
Good to chat to you.